Good evening and welcome to the regularly scheduled meeting of the Harbor Advisory Board for the City of Morro Bay. Today is Thursday, October 2nd, 2014. Please let the record show that we do have quorum. Everyone's here except our fishing representative. And we'll start off with a moment of silence. Thank you, and we'll now move on to the Pledge of Allegiance. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And we'll now move on to Chair and Advisory Board Member announcements and presentations. And I think before we go to the actual announcements, I'm going to start off with a presentation because I've got something here in front of me that is very special for one of our family members of the Harbor Department. And as you know, the City of Morro Bay gives out pins in recognition of anniversary dates for different employees for the city. So I feel privileged to be able to hand this one out tonight. I feel fortunate to be able to do this. I'm proud to. So in the Harbor Department, we have an anchor that has been there now for 15 years. She's seen a fair amount of transition the last 5, but she has been consistent in terms of a smile and always meeting requests, regardless of what they are or sometimes how crazy they are. So I don't know how she does it with such a smile all the time, but she does. So if the audience would please join me in recognizing Polly Curtis for 15 years of service. Give her a round of applause, please. Thank you, Paula, and congratulations. We appreciate your service. All right, now we will move on to other announcements by board members. I know you'll be leaving early tonight. Would you like to announce that? No? Okay.
Nothing.
I'll announce that Gene's going to leave, has to leave in about 15 minutes, and he regrets having to leave early, but he did let us know. Yes, go for it. Microphone, please.
Yes, I would just like to remind all boat owners here in Morro Bay, whether you're a fishing vessel or a sailing yacht or anything, what's up on the screen here is the survey for our marine facilities, the haul out, storage. There's a little bit in there about storage yard. Please get a hold of one of these and fill it out. You can go online or you can go to the Harbor Department. They have copies of this, but you can go to SurveyMonkey, and this will pop up and fill out the information. It is greatly needed for us to make a competent sense of what we want to put here for a marine facility and what you guys want. So if you haven't done so, please do so. Thank you.
Does it have anything to do with the existing facility?
All it is asking you information about where you haul out, what size boat you have, what things you like to have done, whether you need to store a boat, any of that kind of information. We'll take all that data in and then go from there. Thank you.
And I believe, Dana, there's also a link on the City of Morro Bay website that anyone from the public can go to as well. So that's an easy way to get to it.
Yesterday. Correct, Eric?
Yeah, good.
And you can pick up these surveys at the Harbor office also.
That's what I said. Yeah.
Okay. So many ways to get those in, and we'd appreciate your input on those as well. Ron? All right. That concludes Chair and Advisory Board Member announcements and presentations. We will now move on to the public comment period. And what we ask for public comment, and this is according to the city's procedure, is public comment at this point in the meeting is for anything that's not on the agenda. So public comment in a general nature. If you'd like to comment on something specific, I think some of you are here for the liveaboard ordinance, we would ask that you wait until that agenda item comes up. If you can't stay, if you need to leave before that item comes up, because that'll take us about 25 minutes or so to get there, then you can come up now at this point and give your public comment.
Greetings. You too?
So
Michael
please
the Bear
approach
Rowland,
and
gentleman.
your name and city
Michael.
residence, please.
Yeah. Michael the Bear Rowland. All right. I live on my boat in Marbella. Hopefully a lot longer than I plan on. I came before you guys before about a controversy with this harbor patrol. Becca was here. Sir Eric wasn't. All right. I thought I got it all taken care of. I paid the bills. When I went in the office the other day, he said absolutely not. He would let me have my boat without board on it because it was a scab. I'm old and ugly. My boat's old and ugly. We're not going to sink. Okay? If we need to deal with that, we'll deal with that later. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bear. Anyone else for public comment? All right, seeing no further comments at this time, the public comment period is closed. We'll move on to item A, the consent calendar, which is the approval of minutes from the Harbor Advisory Board meeting held last month, September 4th, 2014. Are there any changes or corrections that need to be made to the minutes as presented? Seeing none, I'll look for a motion to approve.
So moved.
Moved by Lynn, seconded by Jean. Any discussion? All in favor of approving the minutes for the Harbor Advisory Board for September 4th, 2014, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That passes unanimously. And now item B on the agenda, public hearings, reports, and appearances. Our Harbor Department status report from Eric Endersby, our Harbor Director.
Thank you and good evening, and congratulations, Polly. I think she started as a temp. She had about 6 months in as a temp before she got part-time, full-time, and I think she worked 2 jobs, and she's up in IT and working with us for a while, and then eventually we got her full-time. So Polly's been here a long time. Congratulations. Hopefully she'll be here a lot longer. So quite a bit to report on updates here for the Harbor Department. I'll try to be brief as possible. North T Pier maintenance, largely done. Replaced 75-odd piles, did a fair amount of major abutment work right where the pavement meets the pilings. That's all done, meets the wood. Really one piling left underneath the Coast Guard shed that takes a special epoxy wrap that Associated is waiting for some lower tides to be able to get to. And then removal of a couple piles and reinstallation of ladders that went out for repair. So we're just about done on that. Still pretty well on budget. We went back to council a couple times for some additional funding. We're still within that budget, extra budget amount. So we'd hope to be done by Harborfest weekend, but looks like Harborfest weekend's here. So the Harbor Festival isn't incorporating the pier, hadn't planned on it, whether we were working on it or not. They just didn't incorporate the North T Pier this year, so not an issue, but we're still missing the use of that south leg, but hopefully that's not much longer. Recent City Council action. On September 10th, the Harbor, or with input from the Harbor Advisory Board, the City Council unanimously voted to oppose the proposed Dynegy Wave Parks. We heard that back in September 10th. You considered it and what Dynegy was proposing with these wave parks offshore. City Council obviously took that Harbor Advisory Board input to heart, as well as a lot of input from the public. A lot of people spoke, and really hinged on earlier Dynegy's contacts with the city and the fishermen and what they were proposing to do versus what suddenly showed up in the Federal Register was quite a bit different from what we had led to believe. So, City Council wrote a letter in unanimous opposition. And the city attorney also filed a request to intervene, which is granted, I guess, by FERC, which really what it essentially means is if granted, it allows the city to rehear issues that have been decided upon by FERC if they continue on with this permit processing and make a decision. It will enable the city to be able to carry that into core law or into some sort of arbitration to try and resolve what the city may see as issues. So those are both good things, and we'll see what comes out of that. On September 9th, City Council approved the city manager to negotiate and execute a license agreement for the Maritime Museum. The Maritime Museum's been, I'm not sure exactly when they started as an official nonprofit, probably back in the, Danny, you might know, maybe late 80s, early 90s. So in the early to mid-'90s, the city passed a series of resolutions in support of the Maritime Museum, as did the Harbor Advisory Board, as did the Parks and Rec Commission, as did Public Works Advisory Board, a lot of public support. 2 resolutions in support. The original was approval of an area in concept for the museum. That's generally the Front Street parking lot. And then later on, approval of an MOU, which kind of spelled out the city's and the Maritime Museum's understanding of how they believe the process should go forward. The Maritime Museum is proposing to put another boat down on the Front Street parking lot. Part of the process to do that is putting it in the Front Street right-of-way. The Front Street actually does come down the road there, come down the bluff on paper. Obviously, it doesn't come down the road in reality right out here, but it's actually out there on paper, and where the Maritime Museum is proposing to put these new vessels, or the third vessel, is in the Front Street right-of-way, and the operative mechanism for that. And the existing vessels, at least one of the existing vessels is in that right-of-way. The operative mechanism for that was an encroachment permit. Part of the MOU has the city abandoning the Surf Street right-of-way, which is a common practice of cities to get rid of paper streets if they're never going to use them. So if they abandon that right-of-way, the Surf Street right-of-way, that encroachment permit, which allows the Maritime Museum to encroach upon the right-of-way, kind of disappears because there's no more right-of-way. So we're going to enter into a license agreement, which will respell out the things in the MOU that are operative, as well as allow them to display 3 vessels. I know there's concerns out there about loss of parking. As you know, we do see a lot more folks around here these days, and parking is getting pretty full at times. Even in the middle of winter, we seem to fill up our parking lots on a lot of weekends. They're going to rearrange vessels a little bit. The Coast Guard boat will end up going over in the dirt between the existing driveway right next to where the boats are and the driveway that goes into the triangle lot in the park, into the power plant. So that's where the third vessel will go. The Coast Guard vessel will go, and then they're going to bring in the Alma. And our intent is to get them tight enough to where we don't lose any additional parking. The Alma isn't that much longer than that 30-odd foot Coast Guard boat, and hopefully we can get them, faced in there and facing each other in such a way that we don't lose any more parking. So that's going to happen. We're going to start negotiating that license agreement here fairly soon, hopefully within the next couple of months, and then the Maritime Museum will get a crane and start rearranging things. Coastal Cleanup Day, pretty successful down at Bayshore Bluffs Park, as well as the rest of the city. I never have heard the final outcome of the amount of debris removed. I know the Coastal Commission and the local coastal cleanup folks like to take a tabulation and estimate how much poundage and how much volume they bring off the beaches. I haven't heard those numbers yet. We removed just over 50 skiffs, a lot of just pure derelict, falling apart junk, fair amount of tires, fair amount of just metal rubbish down in the water. There's actually an old car frame down there. I'm not sure what kind of car it was or vehicle that's now gotten exposed. That beach used to have a lot of oyster shell and a lot of dirt up above the oyster shell, and it's been eroded away over the last 5, 6, 7 years. And it's starting to expose a lot of stuff underneath the ground there. So that car frame, unfortunately, is going to take a lot more than a small boat to remove. It's probably going to take a crane of some sort. But we've got a lot of boats out of there. A lot of folks marked their boats as requested and signed up with us or registered with us, gave us their information. We've got pictures of them. And a fair amount of them we ended up taking into our yard. A lot of people have already come and claim them. And the rest will eventually go to auction after a certain amount of time. And when we get around to an auction, probably, I'm going to guess springtime at this rate, but you never know. But we'll put that out in the paper and let the Harbor Advisory Board know if in an upcoming meeting when we have that auction, because I know people like to try and come down and see what sort of treasures we have. So if folks keep boats down there, we ask that if they store them permanently, they're marked with ownership information. They're stored and registered with the Harbor Department, that they're in some sort of an operable condition, not just you don't want it in your backyard and it really doesn't float and you're never going to use it, so you put it down there. We'd really request that they be boats that are used occasionally and in usable shape, not the falling apart condition that a lot of them were in. A lot of boats were just flat out dumped down there. And then if they're required to be registered, which some of them are, depending on length and whether or not they've got motors, that they have DMV registration. And nothing else down there. I mean, we don't mind a minimal wood storage rack if you want to get it up off of the ground. There's some pretty elaborate stuff down there that we did remove. We are okay with, like, say, very minimal storage type racks, but no carpeting. I mean, we pulled out, I don't know, a good couple hundred square feet of carpeting, a few hundred square feet of carpeting that people had laid down, which we can understand that you don't want to drag your skiff across the oysters, but laying old shag carpeting on the ground and just letting it rot and go off into the water isn't the way to do either. So no carpeting. If you want carpeting, you can bring it down, keep it at home, roll it out when you need to put your boat in the water, and roll it back when you go away. So hopefully that beach will look and stay cleaner for a little longer. We used to have a road leading down there. If you've been around, Lynn, you've probably been around down there long enough, and Dana, we used to have somewhere on, I think it was on the north side of the stairs, a little dirt road went down the bluff there, and we used to be able to drive a truck down there, and we'd be able to pick stuff up, which we did for quite a while, and then eventually the trees and the bluff started eroding away, and we lost that little dirt path down, so that's why it's been so long since we've been down there. Recent events, 2 credible shark sightings, one on the 7th of September and one on the 17th. Per the protocol, we post our common beach access points. Interestingly, in the conference I was just at this last week, we had a speaker this morning, a fellow biologist from Long Beach Aquarium, a marine fisheries scientist studying white sharks and behavior and all the tagging they're doing. Pretty interesting analysis of why we're seeing so many more. And really it comes down to Marine Mammal Protection Act and the huge increase in marine mammals and a lot of fishery regulation that now pretty much eliminates almost all catch of white sharks. They haven't been able to catch them commercially for a number of years. They used to be a food item, and you'd see them back in the 80s. If you bought shark back in the 80s, it was probably white shark or thresher. That's long since gone, but a lot of the netting and other gear types that would typically entangle sharks are now either severely limited or gone, so they're not being caught anymore, and they're really on the rebound. And just interesting seeing their numbers and their analysis of why we're not seeing a huge increase in attacks on people. There's mistaken identity theories, there's people don't taste good theories, lots of different theories out there, but they don't really have a handle on it. But just, I guess the good part is that they don't bite people very often. But, they're out there. We got to share the ocean, and we're sharing it with more of them. So just be aware of your surroundings. September 6th, there's a culmination Dahlia Days, which the city's been doing for a good number of years. The dahlia is the city's official flower. This year is combined with the Historic Founders Day Parade on the 6th. With the assistance of the Central Coast Women for Fisheries, we towed one of our boats down the road, down Main Street, decorated nicely with sort of some flowing water-looking stuff dangling around it, and had the fishery gals there with us helping with just going down through the parade. So we did win the Best Float Award, which was nice. I personally wasn't down there, so I didn't see what the other floats were, but sounds like there's a fair amount of people and had good weather. September 8th, I think of the last meeting, I reported on the upcoming Never Quit Challenge. That's a Never Quit Challenge. It happens all around in one place all around the country. It's for military veterans and for wounded war veterans to participate in different sorts of challenges. Sometimes they're water-based, sometimes they're land-based, sometimes they're air-based and parachuting. They just do different and wild things every year to challenge themselves and really raise money for charity, for certain veterans charities. This year on the West Coast, it was a 600-mile jet ski run from here that started here with K-38, which is the folks that do our jet ski training, and ran down, made a stop in Port San Luis, made a stop down in Santa Barbara, over to Catalina, and then on down to San Diego. Raised a good amount of money, 3-day event, and by all measure it seemed like it was a success. They had good weather and no incidents that I was aware of. August 15th and 19th, if you were on the water, you might have noticed a lot of students paddling around. That was Cal Poly's Wow Week. We had a lot of kayakers, a lot of canoers, a lot of wowies just all over the place. As usual, I went and spoke to the WOW chaperones and leaders, give them a water safety talk after that drowning we had a few years ago, that tragic drowning of the Cal Poly student down at Montana de Oro at Spooner's Cove. Cal Poly wanted to up their game in terms of water safety and water training for their WOW leaders, so they invited us and Port San Luis in, and we'd go in and give them some basic water safety tips and try to remind them, what to look out for and what not to look out for. So there was over 700 of those leaders that are there. It's pretty big and amazingly organized event. Upcoming events. David Buckingham, new city manager, was hired after an in-house recruitment by Ed Crines, our interim city manager. He started Monday. Like I said, I was gone most of this week in conference, so I haven't met him yet. He made the rounds to all the city departments on Monday. He's coming back to our department tomorrow, so I can meet and greet with him on Tuesday. He had, Tuesday the 30th, just this past Tuesday at 4 to 6, right here at the Vets Hall. He had a meet and greet with the community. I don't know if anybody attended that, but it seems he's got a family of five kids. They've got some acreage over in Tascadero, so they can spread out with their animals. And hopefully we'll get to meet him and learn about what his management style is. He comes out of the military, out of the Army, so should be good. We'll get some stability back. 33rd Annual Harbor Festival, right on top of us. They're already setting up down on the waterfront. They're pretty much business as usual. They've eliminated some of I think the big, huge seafood pavilion tent is gone. They're trying to downsize a little bit in that regard. They're still going to have seafood showcased and commercial fishing, but a little smaller. They've got a kids' cove area, a little enhanced kids' play area that'll be down by our office. Commercial fisherman's barbecue, a little wine and beer court, and a lot of live music throughout the weekend. So it looks like the weather's going to be phenomenal. Hopefully we don't get too much strong offshore winds that are just going to play havoc with the tents, but we'll see how that goes. And then snowy plover season is officially over as of the 30th of September. State Parks called it quits a couple of weeks ago when they had no more active nests. Paula, do you know if they brought fencing down this week? Fencing came down off the sand spit. So you're free to roam freely on the sand spit again. That will go back up sometime in March with the new nesting season. And according to Parks, they had one of the most successful hatching. They basically track and mark, and every egg they know when it was laid, when it should hatch, when it does hatch, the chick that comes out of it. They do some banding, and then they try to track what happens, and they report that this year on the sand spit was one of the most successful years they've ever had. So whatever we're doing, it looks like it's working. And then finally, State Lands Commission. You have a couple of attachments inside the staff report here. State Lands Commission, as you know, is our landlord. We are a Tidelands Trust property. The state owns our waterfront from the center line of the Embarcadero, basically out to the 3 Mile line, and then some other areas. And we manage that for state lands for all those uses as specified in the Coastal Act: commerce, navigation, fisheries, recreation, environmental protection, a few others that I can't list. But we're here in trust for the state to operate these waterfront properties, to generate revenue, to protect the environment, to provide recreation, to do all that stuff. And we earn revenues, and our leaseholders earn revenues, and all those revenues go back into the Tidelands Trust. There was an allegation, I think last year, it might have started in 2012, that with the power plant, there were two agreements that the power plant had back in the, I think, early 2000s when they had hopes of redesigning and rebuilding that plant. One agreement was our lease agreement for the outfall to the tune of about $250,000 a year. That went to the Harbor Fund. And then they did a community development agreement with the city that went to the general fund for $500,000 a year, that whether or not the power plant went through its rebuild, they were to pay to this community development fund $500,000 a year to go into the general fund to do community benefit type projects. The allegation was that community development grant, $500,000, should have rightly gone into the Harbor Fund. Well, I would have enjoyed that extra $500,000. State Lands Commission investigated, and they looked into it, and they determined that no, that's separate. The license agreement, or the lease agreement for the outfall, properly goes into the Harbor Fund, and the development agreement was unrelated to the Tidelands Trust, where obviously the outfall is right in the Tidelands Trust. The power plant is not. So, darn it, we didn't get that $500,000. And then there's been some complaints to the city council that, and again, we're here about liveaboards, residential use typically in our Tidelands Trust area is not allowed by the State Lands Commission. You cannot live in a home on the waterfront in our lease sites. There are exceptions. The two exceptions are caretaker type uses and watchman type uses, and a lot of our lease sites now have caretaker units. The newest one, I'm just off the top, Anderson Inn, has a small caretaker's unit where a person is able to reside, but their primary purpose of the residence is to caretake that property and to be a manager of that property. That is allowed under State Lands Commission, as are liveaboards on vessels. The contention that the council was receiving was that liveaboards should not be allowed because they are residential use of title and trust properties. Well, liveaboards are looked at with the same sort of consideration, the same sort of treatment, that they are a safety and security caretaker type force, and that's why they're allowed. They must be regulated, as we are with our liveaboard ordinance, to 10% of the total boating population. So one of the allegations was that there was an Attorney General ruling that said, no, that's not correct. That Attorney General's ruling, and if you look at the paperwork that I provided, that Attorney General's opinion was specific to a situation up in Redwood City where they had the big boats, or big houses that are actually, true houses built on floats. And the Attorney General determined or ruled that that was truly a residential and not a caretaker type use, and believed that that should get phased out. So it was unrelated. State Lands Commission, I contacted our staffer for State Lands, and they confirmed that no, liveaboards aren't allowed use, as long as they're regulated and you're not going over 10%. So that, I think, is the last, my status report. Any questions on all that?
Any questions or comments for Eric with regard to the report? You all right now? Yep. No questions. Thank you, Eric. That concludes item B1, our Harbor Department staff report. And that will take us on to item C, unfinished business. And item C1 is the review of the liveaboard ordinance regarding liveaboard permit inspections and marine surveyor requirements. And I would remind everybody that this topic is fairly specific to the ordinance with regard to the inspections and the marine surveyor requirements. If my recollection is correct, I think one of our astute members of the board questioned what qualified marine surveyor, the word qualified, and I think that's actually, that one question I think got us going on this path. And as a reminder for the way public comment will work on this topic is we'll first hear the staff report from Eric, and then we will ask any questions of Eric as a board, and then we'll open it up to public comment. And we do it that way to give you, the public, the opportunity to hear the full report, to hear any questions that we vet out, and then you can give your public comment. If after we have extended discussion, we'll open up public comment again. So our objective as a board and the chair here is to get as much public comment as possible. We're all on the same side, and we want to do what's right for the Bay and for our liveaboards as well. So we're in this together. With that, I will turn it over to Eric for the staff report on this item.
Thank you. So a lot of material in here, mostly attachments and appendices and less staff report. But as you said, Jeff, we've heard this a couple times before, this item on the Harbor Advisory Board, and we're bringing it back again. November 2013, we had a report on the status of the liveaboards and the liveaboard permits, and during declaration of future agenda items, the board wanted to bring back an item on reviewing the marine surveyors' acceptability. I guess the way the liveaboard ordinance reads is that a marine surveyor can be used if he's deemed quote-unquote acceptable by the Harbor Department without any definition of what that means. And then in addition to review of the permit inspection standards and how to consistently apply them and what sort of standards we use versus what we existing have on the books. So we had it back on April 3rd of this year as agenda item C1 and had some more discussion. And at that point, the board, you folks wanted some more research, some more background. Ron graciously volunteered to do some research and look at what other harbors are doing, what other ports, and what other materials already out there, and what's been accepted by other agencies, which he brought forth, and which was mostly in, I think, Appendix A and Appendix B. Appendix B is pretty short. Appendix A really deals with vessel safety, equipment, operability, seaworthiness, fit for service, other sorts of issues. And Appendix B is a little bit of information on a professional marine surveyor and a definition of that. So what we really have is, currently on our books, in our liveaboard ordinance, we inspect the vessel for having an MSD and having a few basic pieces of equipment that the vessel is operable and seaworthy. The liveaboard ordinance requires that the vessel is suitable for operation on waters of the Pacific Ocean. In terms of the inspection goes, it's not a full-on marine survey. I don't think it was ever intended to be a full-on marine survey, but it is a judgment call by a professional of some sort, mostly up until we've had a local marine surveyor doing over the last few years. Up until that point, it was all the Harbor Department doing it. And we would do it based on our training and our expertise on a vessel. And again, it wasn't a survey. It was basically, I think, given our operable and seaworthy definitions and looking at a boat, and it's got the basic minimum equipment, the engine as designed operates, its masts are standing, it appears to be material in good condition. It becomes a judgment call of whether or not it's made way safely to its point of inspection and back. And that's about all we've had to work with. There's no definitions really in our in the Muni Code in terms of bearing down any deeper on operable and seaworthy. There is some things in Harbors and Nav Code in terms of an unseaworthiness definition. It's pretty scant. There's Harbors and Nav Code requirements for basic minimum safety equipment, life jackets, fire extinguishers, those sorts of things. But beyond that, we were left to our own devices to come up with what is a passing vessel and what is not a passing vessel. And then in terms of the marine surveyor, again, it just says acceptable to the city, to the Harbor Department, with no definition of what acceptable may be. It didn't say it had to be a surveyor that's a member of this, a member of that, or passes this or passes that. It just says acceptable. So what we're bringing back to the board is a sort of a smorgasbord, I guess, or buffet of potential areas that could possibly be incorporated into the liveaboard ordinance to try and better define what the inspection ought to be and better define what the marine surveyor acceptability may be. Various ways of skinning this cat. One is identify sort of some global areas of interest or some larger areas that the Harbor Advisory Board would like to see more research or specific type proposals brought back. Or the Harbor Advisory Board, if they see fit, to look at specific areas, whether it's in this report or other things that you may have, to specifically try to incorporate. Or, and I hate to bring up this word again, but I will, another ad hoc committee. I know we've got a few going now, which is, we did a couple of ad hoc committees over the years for the liveaboard ordinance and a couple of revisions over the last 2 decades. That's certainly a possibility to get a little more focused attention, to bring some more of the stakeholders in, to bring things back to the Harbor Advisory Board. So I'm not going to go into a ton of specifics on, the appendices and the vessel safety and operable and equipment requirements and everything that we've got in the appendices, just knowing that it's here and this is some possible things to pull from and where the board wants to go and where we may want to see some emphasis, get some input from the public. We've got the liveaboard code, the municipal code itself, in the staff report as well, and the inspection form. I've got our harbor rules and regulations as well if we need to pull that up. So a fair amount of material, so I will turn it back to the board and see where you want to take it.
Thank you, Eric. And I'll remind the board members again, this is for questions, so to illuminate any areas that you need illuminated, not for discussion. We'll hear public comment before we go into actual discussion on it. I do have one question for you, Eric. Does the Harbor Department maintain a list of any form of acceptable surveyors?
No.
Other questions for Eric?
No.
Ron?
Eric, to put this possibly into context, do I understand correctly or incorrectly that a review of the liveaboard ordinance is one element, only one element of multiple elements related to the review and possible updating of the Morro Bay Harbor rules and regulations in general.
You're correct, Ron. This aspect of the liveaboard ordinance, there's a couple other aspects that I'd like to address at some point, and however we end up moving forward with this, there's the issue that the fishermen brought up that we kind of put to bed a while back, but, the old guys rule, provisions on the slip qualifications. I'm working on updates of our paperwork, basically our contracts with our boaters when they come in, our dockage agreements, and insurance requirements and all that kind of stuff, and we're working on an update of that. So, no, you're correct, Ron. There's a number of things on the list that I think what we're trying to do is take them in small pieces and in packets, and if we can get to some sort of conclusion on them with a recommendation, we'll go to the next packet, and if we can get a recommendation on that, we go to the next packet, and then when we've got them all done, we bring them as a package back to City Council and take it as one action. Because if it entails municipal code changes, it gets fairly detailed and lengthy process, so I'd like to take it all as one big package when we get there.
Other questions for Eric? All right, seeing no more questions, we'll move on to the public comment period for this agenda item. And we don't see too many folks here, but we'll limit it to 5 minutes to be sure that everybody has an opportunity to speak. And that's more than the normal 3 minutes. And when we have 1 or 2 people here, we don't put any limit on it. But as fishermen and water people, we tend to go on sometimes. So I'll ask that you respect the 5-minute mark, or come as close to that as you can. And I welcome you up to the podium for public comment on this item.
Good evening. Again, Michael Rowland, they call me Bear. I got a ticket yesterday that I got replaced from the day before for liveaboards. I got a notice on the September 19th, 2014, to whom it may concern. The citation you are given today will be canceled if your liveaboard permit process is complete within the 5 days. Deadline Wednesday, September 24th. Becca, she was on vacation. How can I come talk to her? I'm in the office, she was on vacation. Okay. They also told me last time I was here, I said something about fees owed. They said last letter I got from them was $321. When I went to the office, I apparently owed $500 and change. I had to go get the bank. Came back in. She's a kind lady. She gave me a permit to fill out for liveaboards. While I was at the bank, apparently she made some wrong statements. And apparently I hadn't got my letters because I canceled my mailbox because I get letters from them. All right? And when I paid my bill, got paid off, I told Eric that, I'm going to go ahead and get my liveaboard. He said, no, I'm not going to approve it. Why not? Well, because it's a scab. I told you that before. And the motor on there, it won't go out front. I thought I got a bigger motor. It won't make a difference. Spend money. I've jumped through a lot of hoops to get him the liveaboard. From 07 to 2007 until now, I had to go to court to even give them to give me one. Right? A moment. I have a few tickets here, and they were all, dismissed. They gave me a pile of tickets, like about a half a dozen of them, and they were dismissed. There's one here, the city, this one, the one I just got. All right? I've followed everything you can do. The judge said that I qualified. He went in there with me. All right? And the judge said, you qualify. He wasn't going to give me one. 14 months later, they gave me one with a bill. So we mailed it to you, They hand delivered everything else they want from me. You're a nice fellow. I don't have anything wrong with you, Eric. Not at all, Sir Eric. Eric? Excuse me, sir. I don't have a problem with you. You seem to have a problem with me. I don't have a problem with you. I don't dislike you. I dislike what you're trying to harass me. And you say that I have to put it back to stock. I got a hold of Chris Craft. I beg to differ. When we go to court, you'll see something different. Because I'm not going to change my attitude. I'm just going to try and keep it going. If I have to go out front with it to prove it to you, I will.
Bear.
I'm listening, Bear.
Okay. Well, I was talking to him, excuse me, because it seems to be, And I don't have to go through the same judge again. It's wasting my time, his time, the city's money, the county's money. Right? I haven't done anything ever, have I asked him to help me with anything, ever. Right? I've had to film off boats myself because I don't do it myself. I'm responsible for my boat. Everything I do is responsible for my boat, in the water right. If my boat is unsafe, I wouldn't be on it. I have no place else to go. I have 2 dogs, a bird, and a wife. I've never lived anywhere for the past 10 years but there. I've been in and about on this bay for the past for 40 years. I just appreciate you giving me a little kindness and a little bit of support instead of just throwing money at me I don't have, because I'm a poor man. I work hard, and I haven't even got Social Security yet. Thank you.
Thank you, Bear.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and board members. My name is Drew Jacobson. I am a resident on Morro Bay. Under federal and California state law, only 3 types of marine sanitation devices are allowed on a boat equipped with a toilet. They are a Type 1, a Type 2, and a Type 3. Under the California State Harbors and Navigation Codes, Section 775, which states, "The legislature hereby finds and declares the following." This is state law. 1, marine sanitation devices should be regulated pursuant to uniform standards and procedures, federal codes. And California vessel owners should not be subject to any local regulation as the type of marine sanitation device installed on their vessels. Under Appendix A, under sewage and black water, the language used clearly attempts to regulate the type of marine sanitation device used on boats in Morro Bay. This challenges California law. Again, that's under Appendix A, under sewage and black water. The language used clearly attempts to regulate the type of marine sanitation device used on boats in Morro Bay, and this challenges California law. I point this out because this is only one example of the problems within this document. There are more, but this is a big one. So I ask you, the Harbor Advisory Board, not to rush this document through without input from interested stakeholders who will be directly affected: commercial fishermen, the recreational boaters on the bay, mooring owners, the liveaboard community, and the recreational fishermen who use and transit the bay. The effort of the city in an attempt to protect the health and safety of our bay should be applauded. But to rush through a document without input and discussion from the stakeholders on our bay would be a mistake. Reconvene the 2006 Liveaboard Subcommittee Group and add additional stakeholders, and let's finally get this thing done. Thank you.
Thank you, Drew. Anyone else for public comment?
I agree with this gentleman here. We need to have somebody outside look at this and find out, if his officers are qualified to look at my boat and say it's unsafe. They're a bunch of kids, right? I've been on the water longer than they are old, right? I don't have any problem with them. They're good kids. They work real hard, right? And they're doing their job. But we need to know exactly what's going on here, because I won't, put my sacred space up in the middle of somebody else's face. I won't, So let's just try and keep it, adults, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Bear.
Hi, my name is Denise Jacobson, and I live on Morro Bay. And I know we have to have rules and regulations and liveaboard permits, but I'd really like to see it become more objective than it is subjective right now. I've been in several meetings, and I've heard people talk from the Harbor Department about if you don't have enough money, you shouldn't be on this bay. It's a very subjective comment. I don't think it's a very fair comment to make. When I heard that in a meeting with the state board, the person commented saying, "I will be happy when those people are homeless." And that's who we're dealing with right now. And I think we need to have an objective permit system when there is no subjectivity in it. Thank you.
Thank you, Denise.
Chairman, members of the board, Rory Kramer. I'm a sailor and a commercial fisherman. I've been in and out of this bay for 25 years. That young fellow has helped me out 3 times in getting a dead boat going. Not the prettiest guy in the world, but he's able, and he always shows up to help. These guys are the most, they're just questionable as hell. I've never seen a harbor where Harbor Patrol pulls up, sticks their noses in private people's boats, and just look in the windows, poke around. It's not objective. It really isn't. Becca's been a sweetheart. Eric came to fore when I had a problem with one of his staff this week, and I shouldn't have had to bring it to him. The next thing you know, they're going to want guns. They don't need them. They've already got too much power. Let them rebuild the docks. Leave the people alone. These folks are just trying to get along. That's all I've got.
Thank you, Rory. Anyone else for public comment? All right, seeing no more public comment, the public comment period is closed, and we'll move on to board discussion. So in the staff report, well, first off, I want to throw one thing out quickly just in response to some of the public comment. Appendix A was referred to, and that, I just wanted to be sure that anyone else listening, Appendix A does not cite current rules and regulations or municipal code whatsoever. That's just some of the research, and thank you, Ron, for doing the research that you did. So that's background and research that one of the board members submitted for consideration. So that doesn't mean we're going in that direction. That doesn't mean that factually it's not in the rules and regs at all. That's just background to help with the discussion. So I just wanted to be sure that everyone was aware of that.
Mr. Chair.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Rory. I'm sorry. I can't take questions from the audience. We'll probably open this back up to public comment, I would imagine, after our discussion. But we can't go back and forth. I'm sorry. So in the staff report, our harbor director suggests that. Let's see here. We've got a lot of paperwork tonight. Here we go. Suggests that we come up with either some specific language for suggestions on changes in the ordinance, or highlighting some areas in the ordinance and rules and regulations that we would recommend be changed, and then send that back to the department to work on and come up with some suggested language. My opinion right out of the gate is I think a combination of those two would probably work best. This is pretty meaty. It's also an emotional topic, admittedly, because we're talking about people's homes. And I want everyone to realize that every board member up here is completely aware of that. As a matter of fact, some of the board members are liveaboards themselves. So they're very aware of that. And we don't take it lightly. So we will go the direction that the board wants to go. My feeling at the beginning here that I'll state for you is that I think we don't, obviously, and it was stated during public comment, we don't want to rush through this. I frankly don't see us coming up with every suggestion, giving it to those recommendations to staff tonight and having the matter done. This is too meaty and too involved, I believe, to do that. So what I would suggest is sort of a combination of the two ideas that are in the conclusion in our staff report, and the combination of those two would be any suggestions for specific language, and then also any suggestions that we could request the Harbor Department to take a look at and come back to us with suggested language. So that's where I think we should go with it. But again, I'm here to represent you as the board and represent our stakeholders, the public. So with that, we will open it up to discussion. Bill?
So with that, it would be very difficult, I think, to sit up here for the next 2-3 hours and do that. So are you suggesting an ad hoc committee?
No, well, it's up to the board. Because we're working through this in chunks, I don't personally see the need for an ad hoc committee right now, but if that was the board's will, of course, that would be the will of the board. We're looking at a specific area. We could choose to take this specific area, I suppose, off the table for now and convene an ad hoc committee and look at the entire liveaboard ordinance. I would prefer, because I like to see us get things done, to tackle this portion, get this portion done, and then move on to the next portion, if you will, and take it sequentially.
Okay.
Discussion.
I would agree that we could continue this, like you're talking about, nothing right away. We'll be going through this, and with the public's comments and suggestions along the way. I think that's a good way to go. And the ad hoc committee, I don't think that's necessary. I agree with that part also.
Okay. Thank you, Dana. Bill?
So, it seems to me, at least from the rhetoric that I'm hearing, that there's definitely isolated cases between some members of the liveaboard community and the harbor department. And I don't know if we can address that specifically, but we're only talking 20 documented liveaboards. And it seems to me that we could all agree to what is the qualifications of a marine surveyor, have a list of those individuals that are qualified to do those inspections, and somehow or other maybe tighten up the qualifications, if so be it. I don't know. It seems to me that it is a little bit nebulous, but who makes the final decision? I mean, those things we do probably need to discuss, but, we're only talking 20 liveaboard permits. It's not a lot of people.
So why don't we start off the discussion, thank you for those comments, why don't we start off the discussion with regard to a marine surveyor and what would be considered, what we would recommend to the harbor department for consideration to be an approved surveyor. Now, one of our board members has extensive experience in this profession, and that's Ron. And in some of the information that he gave us, and I wanted to ask you about this, Ron. I was surprised to see that in the definition that you gave, that you provided for us for a professional marine surveyor, a meaning that you gave that is, I would assume, a generally accepted definition, is a person who derives a substantial portion of his or her income from surveying the type of vessel in question and who advertises these services. Though I recalled, I think you and Drew in the last discussion we had on this in the meeting talked about some type of qualification or certification, I should say, some type of denomination after your name or so I'm at a loss in terms of, and I think that's where part of this part of where this discussion is going is, what, in your opinion, Ron, makes for a qualified professional marine surveyor, other than someone just hanging out a shingle and saying that's what they do?
Well, a point of clarification, none of the language that is attached to this agenda item was originated by me. So it's not an expression of my opinion or my experience or whatever. These were, all of the language that you see in the appendices were extracted from, and it's a compilation of, I believe, because Eric's the one that did the compilation, of currently published harbor and port rules and regulations. I looked at about 20 different ports and harbors and their published rules and regulations. The vast majority on the west coast of the United States, but there were 3 or 4 from, I think, the Northeast as well. So that's just a point of clarification. So nothing in the agenda documents reflect my particular feelings on any matter or my opinions. To address another point you made about, and I understand why people would be confused about what makes a marine surveyor. Simply put, and this is my opinion, I've been a marine surveyor for a really long time. There are 2 voluntary certification, broadly recognized voluntary certification organizations in the United States. There are at least 3, if not more, less well recognized organizations that I don't know whether they certify or not, but they provide marine surveyors with some appellation, with some letters to put after their names. And there are active and professional marine surveyors who don't participate in any of that certification process, the public certification process. And a significant number of those people are perfectly qualified marine surveyors. So it's difficult to, having been through this before, it's difficult to say, well, okay, we will determine that a qualified marine surveyor for the purposes of the inspections conducted for the liveaboard and any other situation in Morro Bay must belong to and be certified by X, Y, or Z organization. I think that that's difficult, and I think it's exclusive as well, probably unnecessarily exclusive. It's easy, but I'm not sure it's equitable. And forgive me for a second, because I'm going to segue a little bit into the issue of how the board moves forward. I need to remind myself that the Harbor Department, when it was considering a review of the liveaboard ordinance and its associated activities, the Harbor Department, our resident professionals, determined that there were really only 2 areas that they wanted the Harbor Advisory Board to help them with, to look at. And that's permit inspections and, as it says in the staff report, marine surveyor requirements. So I think we should restrict ourselves to those activities, to those elements. What do I think is a quality? You asked me a question, and I'm perfectly prepared to answer it. What do I think constitutes a qualified marine surveyor? I think first and foremost, a marine surveyor must have an adequate background to enable them to determine whether a vessel is or is not, to determine what the condition of a vessel is, because it may not be good. And those capabilities come from a variety of backgrounds: vessel construction, vessel repair, Coast Guard inspection people, people who have dedicated a great deal of time to educating themselves about boats and what makes a boat run and what doesn't make a boat run and what works and what doesn't work. That can't be, and this is my opinion, that can't be learned quickly, cannot be learned quickly. The second element of requirement is that the individual, just men and women doing the job, the individual must be thoroughly knowledgeable of all of the applicable laws, standards, and guidelines. There are the federal requirements are written law, so that's fairly straightforward, and as far as knowing them. But there's also a very large body of knowledge, or a large body of data, I should say, that's been developed and promulgated over the years by an organization called the American Boat and Yacht Council. It's a huge book, or a large DVD, or CD, but they're voluntary standards. They are not law. I can share with the public and with the board that an ABYC published standard will be looked at with great interest and be given considerable credibility by virtually any court in the land. I do a fair bit of expert witness work, and if we start citing ABYC to some court authority that understands or is led to understand what all that means, they will take it seriously, even though it is not law. So, to recap, what do I think the requirements are? The knowledge and experience to be able to make the judgments about the condition of a vessel, and the knowledge base for the rules, standards, and guidelines that apply to that vessel, and whether they do or do not exist in that vessel, and to what degree and functionality. Did I leave anything out that you asked me?
Nope. All right, thank you, Ron. So one of the challenges that we're going to have tonight in this discussion, and it was brought up succinctly earlier in public comment, is the difference between objectivity and subjectivity. And I'll say it right now, I don't believe there is a way to completely eliminate some subjectivity in this situation. Because even if we set up strict guidelines for, let's say, qualifications for a surveyor, that surveyor is going to use some discretion. There will be some subjectivity. And ultimately, just in any hierarchy, the harbor director is the harbor director. And part of the responsibility of a harbor director, whether it's Mr. X, Mr. Y, or Mr. Z, this has nothing to do with personalities, but the ultimate responsibility and authority of a harbor director is to make final decisions on areas that do have subjectivity. So I see the challenge for us as a board to make recommendations that will eliminate as much subjectivity as possible and provide some guidelines to allow for as much objectivity as possible at the same time. So I think it's a balancing act, but I don't believe that we can completely eliminate some subjectivity from this process. I think it comes with the beast. So here's a thought that I have, and I'd like to get discussion and your ideas on this. I would like to see the Harbor Department, maybe I'm crazy, tell me if I am, maintain a list of acceptable marine surveyors that the public, that liveaboards can go out and use. And I would like to see us give suggestions to the department for what would make up I just lost the word, not qualified, but an acceptable marine surveyor. So whether it's the certification from either two of those groups, or, and I'll just throw out an arbitrary number, 3 years experience in surveying vessels of the type that are being surveyed by that particular surveyor, or, so if it's a list of 3 or 4 things, that would be the objective part. I think ultimately the harbor director would and should still have the ability to have final say on that. But if there were those criteria that would assist any harbor director in making that decision. Because, obviously it's a sensitive thing. It's a sticky wicket, because the way this could go terribly wrong is if there were 6 surveyors that wanted to be on the list, and the harbor director selected 3 without really any set of criteria and too much subjectivity. And I think that's what we're trying to avoid. So those are my thoughts on it. So that's, I would like to see that as a starting point. To me, that makes sense, but I'd like to get the board members' input on this and see if we want to go down that road. Not everybody all at once now. Lynn.
I have a
Oh,
question.
your microphone, please.
I have a question for Ron. The people the organizations that you mentioned, not by name, but the organizations that marine surveyors belong to, do they have a criteria for membership? Or can somebody simply come up and fill out a form and say, I'm a member?
The 2 most widely recognized in the United States have very well-developed and long-developed criteria. And they have a qualification process that steps people through experience and gives the individuals an opportunity to demonstrate knowledge. There are 1 or perhaps 2 other organizations, and I don't know all of them, that have a less well-developed credential process. And then there are a number of them, if I send them fill in the blank, $100, $150, or $250, they will send me a certificate back and tell me that I'm now a marine surveyor.
That was the answer I expected, which doesn't make it any easier. You also said that you did not think it was a good idea to simply say the marine surveyors that are, for our purposes here, qualified must be a member of one of those organizations or one of the 2 well-known organizations. Why not?
I said that I didn't think that they should be restricted to those organizations because there are qualified people, some of them within reasonable driving distance of Morro Bay, who don't belong to either one of the most widely recognized. I don't see as an insurmountable issue providing individuals who hold themselves out to be professional marine surveyors to be notified that there is an opportunity for them to, my word, it may not be the correct word, register with the city of Morro Bay as it relates to this program now. I'm not talking about anything else. I don't see that that's really a big logistics problem. And I also think, Mr. Chairman, that it may not be as knotty an issue as it first appears because, or as subjective, potentially as it appears, because as the Harbor Department has informed us in the agenda item documentation that they provided, the potential inspection criteria are well identified and easily identified items of law, items of published standards, or items of guidelines. For instance, the ones that the Harbor Department provided that are under vessel safety, for instance, every single one of those has an applicable federal regulation attached to it, which makes it by definition objective. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. You know, you will have, according to the federal government, certain kinds of fire extinguishers on board a particular kind of vessel, and they will be tested and tagged on a periodic basis, as an example. If I may, I have a question for Eric, which loops back actually to public comment. Eric, Section 15.40.050 of the existing liveaboard ordinance item number 1, it says conditions for termination slash revocation. Liveaboard permits may be revoked for the following reasons. And item number 1 is discharge of sewage. Do I understand correctly or incorrectly that per current ordinance, city ordinance, that no discharge of any kind, irrespective of what kind of marine sanitation device a vessel may have on board, is permitted in Morro Bay?
That would be my understanding. And where that gets weird is with systems that treat and discharge sewage. And it's a gray area, and it's an area of concern that the Water Board has and others have, and then the Water Board ordinance just flat out says discharge of sewage.
So, am I correct? I mean, if that's the case, then as it relates to one of the inspection points, potential inspection, actually existing inspection points, it's not potential at all, that if a vessel, irrespective of the type of marine sanitation device, which Mr. Jacobson quite correctly identified for us, that those devices at the end of the moment cannot discharge into the bay.
Is that a question or a statement?
That's a question. I just want to be, I'm trying to be as clear on this point as possible because there's a lot of confusion. I've had folks call me in the last week when they saw this agenda item, and that's one of the points that comes up.
It is a confusing point, and it is not terribly, I mean, you can look at straight discharge of sewage, you can look at that on its own merits. But then you look at, and as Drew pointed out, we can't dictate whether you have a type 1, type 2, or type 3. We just say you have to have one that's operable. And the types that treat and discharge, assuming it's operable and working as designed, it is a type 1, type 2, or type 3. It fits into one of those 3 categories. So by definition, it has what it has, and it's an acceptable, purely on its own merits. It's one of the 3 types, but then it's at odds with that section you just read, and it's at, the only thing I can say is it's at odds. I mean, it says no discharge of sewage. It doesn't say treated, untreated, otherwise. It'd be nice if, and maybe those types of devices weren't considered when this was put together, or maybe they weren't very widely used beyond big commercial boats and ships, so they weren't ever thought of as something that would come under consideration.
Thank you. So, Mr. Chairman, because one of the 2 elements of our task are inspections, and it seems to we need to, in our work, we should probably address this gray area and end up, hopefully at the end of the day, making some recommendation at least to resolve the gray area, even if we don't have a resolution for it.
Yeah, and I think I would agree. I think part of our purpose tonight is to identify any of those gray areas or black areas. And there's my marine pun for the night. To identify those, and we don't necessarily tonight have to come up with the solution for that, because our harbor director gave us an out on that. We can identify that and send that back his way, and he can come back to us with some suggested language if he chooses to indulge us. So I don't want to go down that road right now because we were on the surveyor road. So here's my thinking on setting a minimum set of criteria, because I've got to look at worst case scenario. It's just how my mind works. I look at risk, and I've been trained on how to analyze risk, and one of the ways that you look at risk is you look at absolute worst case scenario. So worst case scenario could be is if there are no real criteria to get on the list of approved surveyors, any knucklehead could go down and put his or her name on that list. And that person could be amenable to the process of passing votes. Now, I'm not saying that has happened. I'm not proposing that that would happen. That is a worst-case scenario in a risk analysis. There are objective things that the person would have to check off, and maybe they're checking some of them correctly, maybe they're checking some of them incorrectly. But I would like to see, myself, some type of minimum set of standards. And I'm not talking about an extensive list of things and this person has to meet all of these qualifications. What I'm looking at is a minimum bar, an absolute minimum set of standards, whether it's, and what comes to mind is the accreditation by either two of those organizations or a certain amount of experience surveying vessels for the type of vessels that would be surveyed. I mean, those are the first two things that come to my mind. But to me, it makes common sense to have that minimum set. And then beyond that, then with approval of the harbor director, that person would be placed on the list. Dana?
Yes, I'm hearing big variety here, trying and compress this down a little bit and streamline. We're looking at a level of acceptance, the highest level of, say, these two most respected certificates of marine surveying, which I agree, I think this is quite a ways beyond what we're looking for these 5 items of inspection. It doesn't need to be, the vessel doesn't have to be surveyed that extensive, but I agree, we don't just want somebody who can just sign, here I am. I think we should take the discretion of the harbor department. That's what they're here for, that they have a list of people that are approved by them to do these inspections, and that an ABYC criteria for the inspections be integrated in what the harbor department is looking for. The criteria is more important than just what certificate the inspector has. That's what I think. That's where I'm at right now.
Okay, thanks, Dana. Input from other board members, please. All right. So, do we want to then? Well, and I'll open it up for a public comment once again, because I see a lot of posturing going on out there in the gallery. So I'd like to open it up.
I'm confused.
Please approach the podium and state your name for the record.
My name is Chris
We'll keep
Anderson.
this to 3 minutes. Your name, please, sir?
Chris Anderson.
Thank you, Chris.
And I'm kind of confused about this inspection thing. Is this a seaworthy thing? Or are we really just concerned where everybody's waste is going? I've heard both of them brought up, and I was sitting there asking myself, how do you survey a hull when it's in the water? I can't think of any way that you can do that. You can poke a stick in the bottom of the boat and say, oh, dry, it's not leaking. But you can't guarantee the integrity of that hull. And like Eric, I agree, most of these boats that are really a hazard are wooden, and they're old. And they're the ones that are going to sink in a storm. There's the ones that are going to hit a dock and go down and fill the bay with fuel and waste. And now, how are we going to address this issue? I mean, if you're going to do a survey, we're not equipped to do a survey. You have to take that boat out of the water. And a lot of boats, we don't have a hull out here. You may say we have a boatyard, but I would say otherwise. It won't take a lot of the boats here. A lot of the boats are too long, too big, too heavy. So maybe we should be striving towards that boat haul-out yard. And Chris Anderson would like to volunteer when that gets to the planning stages. And I don't think you can go anywhere with this liveaboard thing until you can we can resolve that issue. I mean, there's no way to check, see if a boat's seaworthy. Well, it's in the water. It has to be hauled out. I bought a boat, and I had one of these marine surveyors who happened to be a friend of the broker, you know, and yeah, everything's good. And I said, I'm not buying the boat till you take it out of the water. And I took it out of Ventura, and I found additional things with it. And that's really the only way I know how to sit there and survey it. Maybe we need to get an x-ray machine in here. If we're talking about having more incidences, like a tidal wave or something catastrophic happening, yeah, boat's going to be full of restaurants besides sunken boats. But I digress. I've said what I need to say. You really can't survey a boat like that.
Thank you, Chris.
Drew Jacobson. To answer Ron's question about whether or not a Type 1 or a Type 2 is acceptable in the Bay, there is a process that's set up through state ordinance to answer that question. Under Section 781, the California Attorney General, at the request of the department, the state board, any regional board, or any aggrieved person, which would be several of us, shall petition the Superior Court for injunctive relief as may be appropriate to secure compliance with this chapter. So you can, as well as I, basically write a letter to the Attorney General and take the city to Superior Court. And the question will be answered at that point. As far as surveying itself, Ron probably knows, that you can belong to one or more associations, but what it comes down to really is, if you're a professional surveyor, is whether or not insurance companies, financial companies, banks, underwriters accept your survey. Ron can read a survey. Ron is at that level of marine surveyor. He can read a survey from a person and probably tell in the first 10 minutes of reading it, because they're generally 17, 18, 19 pages long, whether a surveyor is acceptable. Also, at the end of appendix, I believe it's appendix B, I'm not sure if Ron put it in, somebody put it in, language of what might be acceptable for a surveyor for the city. It's good language. It is good language. So you might take a look at that. It's at the end of the document that was submitted. Thank you.
Thank you, Drew. Anyone else for public comment at this time?
Chairman Rory Kramer again. Thank you. Ron's absolutely correct. There are many associations that do certifications for surveyors, but at the end of the day, I think you might be kind of reinventing the wheel. We've already got a United States body that does this. Coast Guard Auxiliary. We've got an MSDT office down the road that comes and inspects each and every one of our commercial vessels. Coast Guard Auxiliary is available every week to go out, every boat. If they okay a boat, they can't un-okay it. As far as I'm concerned, they're the bottom line.
Thanks, Roy.
Mike Rowland, again, Bear. Hi. I was surveyed by a a member of the USSA, United States Surveyors Association certified number, U.S. Coast Guard master licensee. All right? As far as I'm concerned, that's pretty, he knows what he's doing. I know what I'm doing. He has last say, all right? We don't have a dictatorship here. He wasn't elected, he was appointed. We should have a harbor master here that's elected so we can all deal with it, all right? I voted for city council. Nobody I voted for got, well, one person, but still, that's not, it should be an elected office. Thank you.
Anyone else for public comment at this time?
Denise Jacobson again. I'm not sure if I can just comment about surveying right now or anything. Are we going to come back around to anything else? I'll wait.
I would imagine we'll probably have one more round of public comment.
Okay, then I'll wait because it's not about surveying.
Anyone else? All right. Thank you. Public comment is now closed. Eric, did you want to respond to something?
Yeah, I just want to remake the point. You know, in the staff report, I point out somewhere in there that should a bunch of inspection criteria get lumped on to any type of liveaboard inspection, at some point, in my opinion, it starts to cross over into a true vessel marine survey. And again, and also as I pointed out in my staff report, contrary to some of the public comment you heard, we're not a bunch of kids. We are recognized and trusted experts in vessel and boating safety. We do a very cursory inspection, assuming the vessel is designed, constructed, and maintained as it is manufactured. We do a pretty cursory inspection for the liveaboard inspection itself. The liveaboard ordinance in section 15.40.040 and permit issuance, A1, in terms of the vessel speaking to any sort of a survey or the vessel's condition, the only thing that it speaks to in the whole ordinance is vessels to be used for liveaboard purposes must be in good material condition, not likely to sink or become a menace to navigation, and to be of a design suitable for operation on the waters of the Pacific Ocean. All vessels must be currently registered or documented. The liveaboard ordinance, when it was crafted through that whole public process 20-odd years ago, obviously the desire was there that if somebody wanted to have a marine surveyor come in and make the determination under that section that the boat met that criteria, that would be okay to the city. The assumption being most people would do it with, or I'm assuming the assumption was most people would do it with a harbor patrol. So our harbor patrol officers make that determination based on the material at hand and their training and expertise. Marine surveyor obviously can go a lot deeper and a lot further and make a lot bigger determination. I don't think it was ever intended to be a true marine survey.
All right, thank you, Eric. So we'll have another opportunity for public comment, as I mentioned before, so take a mental note of what you'd like to say. We're going to make sure that your voice is heard. So, so let me back up. Yeah, Bill.
You know, as I say, this could go on and on and on. So my recollection after sitting here listening to, I think, our resident expert, Ron, there really isn't any criteria for a marine surveyor. It's either work experience, it's some type of certification, but even if you're certified, you might not be a capable marine surveyor. So, with that said, I don't think we have a problem. I mean, right now, in this last April meeting here that we had as the Harbor Board, there was one surveyor here in the audience, Drew Jacobson, and the Harbor Patrol, they recommend them if someone wants a private individual, and if someone else wants to get on a list, I don't see there any reason why they can't, but I don't think we really have a problem in the marine surveyors, because we're talking about liveaboards, and there's a lot of things that the boat owner can do to get it certified. I don't really think we have a big problem, personally.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you. Yeah, so maybe we're fixing something that doesn't need to be fixed. So as a follow-up to that, Bill, and if we don't, if it doesn't need fixing, we'll close this up and move on to the next issue within this issue. So as it currently stands, the current liveaboard ordinance states that the liveaboard inspections can be performed by a harbor patrol officer or and this is where the rubber meets the road here, right here, a qualified marine surveyor acceptable to the city. So if we decide that we don't have a problem, it's fine. We don't have a problem in our opinion as a board, but that lets stand a potential problem. And then again, I don't want to stir anything up if it doesn't need stirring up. But right now, as it stands, if someone came to the harbor and the harbor department and said, I want to be put on the list, if we recommend that a list be maintained, and the harbor department did that, then it would be up to the discretion of the city to put that person on or not without any criteria whatsoever, which to me just seems like a lot of discretion. As I mentioned earlier, at the end of the day, there will be some subjectivity and discretion there. That's part of the job of a director. That's what they're hired to do. But thank you, Bill, because you're bringing up the point, do we need to even continue to go down this path?
Well, you have an ordinance right here. If someone wants to get an inspection, they can look at that. Whether or not there's a list or not, I think is irrelevant. I mean, I think people are knowledgeable and smart enough to go to Google or pick up the Yellow Pages, in this case, I don't think, and find a marine surveyor if he wants to do it on a private basis. It states in our ordinance that they can do that. Simple as that. And,
Okay, thanks. So, it's a good point. Are we stirring up dust here where it doesn't need to be stirred up? And we'll go back to public comment in a while, and that's something that I would be interested in hearing from the public about as well. I mean, has it been working okay with regard specifically to qualified marine surveyor acceptable to the city? So if it's been working, we don't need to fix what ain't broke, as the saying goes. Any other comments with regard to that?
Insofar as the board's process is concerned, what could be done would not only with the surveyor issue, but also with the inspection issue. There's been some work done on the part of the board. There's been thought given on the part of the board. There's been public input. Each of the board members, independently, so that we don't get into Brown Act issues, could be given the opportunity to review these materials in this agenda item and provide their input to the chair with any comments or any input or anything that they'd like to do, bearing in mind that the purpose would be to provide that information to the Harbor Department, which is in effect the city of Morro Bay, and allow them to assimilate it and to use what they think would be useful to them. The last time we talked about, when we were last talking about this business, there were concerns expressed, at least I did, and I think other people did as well, express concerns about a couple of things. The possibility for subjectivity as brought up by Mrs. Jacobson, some perceived liability risks for the city of Morro Bay and its citizens who pay the taxes, always the safety issues relative to vessels, all vessels on the bay, and that's what got us here. So I'd like to have the opportunity to respond to this agenda item on a point-by-point basis, or whatever points I think, and provide that information to you, knowing that it would go back to the Harbor Department for their consideration and their determination as to whether there needs to be ordinance changes or do not need to be ordinance changes. For instance, one of the things that's in the current ordinance is this business about operable on the Pacific Ocean. Well, there are liveaboards, in fact, that are permitted in Morro Bay that are not, in my opinion, vessels intended by virtue of design and/or construction to operate on the Pacific Ocean. They're protected waters vessels, and as long as they're in the bay, they're, it's protected waters. They can fulfill their obligations under their liveaboard permits without having to go out into the Pacific Ocean. That's a different kettle of fish to go out there. So I do think that this is what got us here. I do think that there are some issues with the ordinance. I think there are some opportunities to improve the ordinance. And I'd like to have the opportunity to provide you with the input, with my input about that, and knowing it would go back to the Harbor Department. And I don't see personally a need for us to necessarily go farther than that. I'm willing to participate in whatever the board decides, but I don't see a need to go much farther than that. And insofar as criteria for surveyors are concerned, we can provide some suggested criteria to the Harbor Department. I do agree that at the end of the day, the Harbor Department needs to be, or the city, if you will, the city needs to determine, who is appropriate and who is not. I don't want to use the word qualified. Who's appropriate and who's not appropriate to do these inspections.
Thank you, Ron. I'll first respond to your suggestion as far as process, and then bring us back to this surveyor issue, because I want to get the surveyor issue nailed down. All due respect, I don't agree at all with your suggestion for the process, because that's what we're doing right now, and I wouldn't feel comfortable as chair taking suggestions and then just moving them on to the director. That's why we're here as a board, to do that in a public forum. So it's a bit of a slog, and we've got to go through meetings like this, but this gives us the opportunity to air this publicly, and probably more importantly, to get the input from the public as well. So, that's what our objective as a board is here. So I'll circle us back to the marine surveyor issue, and then to meet your intent of the suggestion, Ron, what I think we can do then is point out some areas. You pointed one out earlier. We'll get back to that. I've got one that I've got a question on. Point out those areas that do need some change, some of those gray areas that can be enhanced, and maybe give some suggestions, and staff could take a look at that and then come back to us with suggested language. So there may be still a couple of iterations here that we need to go through. But back to, because we're going to get at least this one nailed down tonight, the qualified marine surveyor acceptable to the city. What Bill has stated is that, and I'm going to paraphrase, correct me if I butcher it at all, Bill, is that we're fixing a problem that doesn't need fixing. And I'm okay with that, but I'm okay with that, but I'm reminding myself, as well as the public here vocally, that does leave acceptable to the city, leaves full discretion to the city on what is acceptable. And
well, as you said,
the city
well, as
has
you said,
delegated
Jeff,
that responsibility to the Harbor Department.
Right, and so the thing is that, as you stated earlier in your discussion here, Jeff, Eric over here is the harbor master, and he ultimately makes the final decision. So if we have a problem with his decision-making process in marine surveyors, then we then need to take task. As of right this moment, I don't think there is a problem.
Thank you, Bill. Yeah, and I'm okay with that. Eric, do you feel at this point that the process, in terms specifically with regard to qualified marine surveyor acceptable to the city, that it's been working okay? Do you think we should or should not maintain a list, or do you think it's been working okay as it's been?
I don't know that we need to maintain a list. I mean, if you take the extreme examples, Ron's example of, there's some organizations out there, and I don't know what they are. I'm not well versed in all of it. I know of NAMS and SAMS and a couple others, but if there is indeed an organization out there that you can pay $200 and answer 10 questions and you get a certificate in your marine surveyor, that would worry me. But how do I determine whether it was, somebody that went that's got the experience and knowledge and know-how and is associated with an accredited type organization, or some that out there that aren't accredited, associated with any, and they're perfectly good surveyors, or the guy that's gone and gotten his one out of the Cracker Jack box. You know, it's acceptable to me, and then the next question becomes, if I find one that's unacceptable, I just say, no, you're not acceptable. And then we let it fall out, if it falls out. So far, no, that has not happened. We've had one surveyor that has done any of these at all.
Exactly.
And I have not researched or tried to determine one way or another which sort of certificate he has. I know the organization that he gets stamped on with his stuff, but I'm not expert enough in marine surveyors in the marine surveyor world to know where Drew's certificate or qualifications fall on that scale. And again, it goes to Bill's question, and do we need that? Do we need to find out where that scale is? Do we need to define that scale?
So, and what I'm reiterating here, I'm repeating something, but to me, common sense would dictate that there is a minimum set of standards. It just seems that we can't come up with a suggestion for those minimum set of standards. That's my thinking on it. Yes, Ron?
Actually, there's a pretty simple way to establish your standard. When I told my attorney 35, 40 years ago, whatever it was, that I was going to start doing marine surveying, he said, "Are you crazy? Do you not understand that marine surveyors have unlimited liability?" Turns out he was right. So, having said that, the inspection form, and forgive me, Eric, I can't recall whether it does or does not. One way to address this is the inspection form that's turned into the city that would be used by a marine surveyor and is turned into the city would make specific reference to whatever inspection criteria are determined to be required, and that they are attesting that the vessel does or does not, they say yes, nay, whatever, does or does not meet those criteria. If I was a marine surveyor and I knew that that's what I was required to do, I'd take that pretty seriously.
Okay, so other comments? So because I think we're just going to wrap that subject up without having to go any further on, but before I do that, I want to open it up to public comment again. It looks to me that the direction we're taking on that is leaving it exactly as it stands. So with that said, I'll open it up to public comment once more. Is there anyone that would like to comment?
Drew Jacobson. I agree with you, Ron. I do take the liability issues seriously. That's why on my form, I show that I do not accept liability. I have language on the form that states that. And the reason being is because the ordinance itself, under Section 1, which I think Eric mentioned, that it has, it states basically that it's seaworthy and operable. Those terms are ridiculous to use. By the type of survey that the city does on a boat, the city has huge liabilities. I mean, huge liabilities. If they can go on and I just had my survey done on my boat. I had a city harbor patrol officer. He spent 5 minutes. I basically directed him around to what to look at, what he should check. I was granted a permit, or at least I think I'm going to get a permit. I may not. When I do get that permit, if I do get that permit, if I take my boat out onto the Pacific Ocean, the city has indemnified me. They've underwritten me. They've said that my boat is seaworthy, that it's capable of ocean going without any possible probable sinking of the boat. Now, I get excited when I get my permit. I take my family, or let's say somebody else takes their family, friends out to celebrate the permit. And the boat, in fact, does sink because a through hull is corroded, which the city does not check, or there's dry rot in the hull, which the city does not check, and the boat sinks. Those people will sue the city, and they will win big time. They will win everything. This is a problem with the ordinance. You can pass this ordinance off as saying, well, we can just put it off. This is serious business. The city is liable. It doesn't take an attorney to answer those questions about the liability of seaworthiness of the vessel, number one. So I try to protect myself as much as possible in my documentation of the boat. I do not claim that the boat is seaworthy. The city does. I do not. I have spent 20 minutes on the boat. I did not look at any of the systems on the boat, any of the through hulls, whether the boat is materially sound. You can't. That takes a survey that lasts a day or 2 days, 17, 18 pages of survey to even come close. And even then it's a question of, well, maybe. But the city seems to say, fine, that's what we're going to do. I'm indemnified by the city. And anybody who has a liveaboard boat in here is indemnified also. They're underwritten by the city. The other thing about it is checking liveaboards, inspecting liveaboards. As a surveyor on the bay for the last, 6, 7 years, I've inspected a lot of boats, full survey inspections. I've found that at least a quarter of the boats that I have inspected have some issue. These are non-liveaboard, these are recreational boats. A quarter of those boats have some issue with their MSD, whether the Y valve is in the wrong position, but they're discharging overboard. In some cases, because the boats on this bay are older boats, some of these boats don't even have a Type 1, Type 2, or Type 3. They were built in the 50s and the 60s. They're on the bay right now. They don't have any MSDs, and they are discharging directly into this bay right now. That if you extrapolate a quarter of the boats on this bay, that's about 100 boats right now that are discharging on the bay. People use them as weekend condos, especially in the state marina. Pump outs? None. Able to move your boat in and out of the marina? No. Shoaling, you can't move. Most of these boats, a lot of these boats have been bought up by folks that are inland. They come down for a 3-day weekend on the bay, and they use them as condos. There's no pump out facilities. They're going directly into the bay. And if you look at the NEP of last report last April, a hot spot, where else? One of the hot spots is at the marina. We're being checked. 30 boats on the bay are being checked. I know my boat's doing the right thing. I know my boat meets the law. But 470 other boats on this bay? No. You don't know. The city doesn't know. Eric doesn't know. And he continues this nonsense of 30 boats when there's 470 boats that should be checked. Probably, as I said, a quarter of the boats, 100 boats, direct discharging right now. That should be looked into. That should be changed. I mentioned that 7 years ago in 2007 at 2 meetings, and I said something's going to happen if those boats aren't changed. 2 years ago, they had an E. coli outbreak with some of the oyster farms back here. You were warned that that would happen. And tonight, I hear nonsense about surveyors and what should be done. These are simple surveys. It's 10-minute survey. It's not a survey. This is an inspection. The liability is a killer because the city won't change section number 1. to lay it on me, so I have to do it myself, and they still stand behind it. And as far as checking other boats, they refuse to do it. They've refused to do for 7 years. So I'd really like this to go to some sort of citizens group where we can really discuss what's going on in this bay, because the city's not going to do it. They've been angry at me for bringing up this issue for 7 years. It needs to be talked. It needs to be discussed, because these boats are out there and they're hurting the bay, and this has to change. Thank you.
Thank you, Drew.
Seems like the same people keep coming up here. Hi, Mike Rowland, Bear. This is a liveaboard application. Oh, yeah. At the bottom, it says, vessel inspection by Harbor Department. Of course, the vessel name, inspector, vessels, and then VHF operation, telephone, current registration. Vessel made way under her own power to the inspection site without being a threat to navigation or a danger to sinking or causing injury. And then the last one is a Coast Guard approved marine sanitation device, a portable potty, right? When one of the harbor patrol officers went on my boat the first time they inspected it, they went down below, they looked at my device and they said, Bear, there's something wrong with this. I said, what do you mean? She goes, well, if there's no overboard. I said, of course not. Chris Kraft didn't make one. I've never seen anything like it before, right? She's supposed to be an inspector. She doesn't know what she's doing. They're not children, excuse me. Right. They're young gentlemen, right? And you have a good scoutmaster. Scott is a great guy. And these kids do what you tell them to do. And then there's a lot of opinions involved. I have a problem with you guys. I really don't. I don't want to lose my home, my sacred space. Have a little compassion. Thank you.
Thank you, Bear. Anyone else? All right, thank you. All right, I'll start over. It was pointed out during public comment about the word seaworthiness and the extent of surveys. And I'm looking back to the municipal code, the ordinance, item number 1, and rereading that. You pointed that out to us earlier, and I'll reread that in just a moment. But are there other rules and regulations that are on top of that in the process that I'm missing somewhere with regard to the seaworthiness? And
Not in the liveaboard ordinance.
okay.
That's the sole reference to vessel condition, and then the inspection form itself just reflects that section where it said vessel made way to unknown power without being a threat to navigation or danger to sink or cause injury.
So there were some comments made with regard to the liability. In reading this, I'm not an attorney, but I played one on TV. I can tell that this was written with an attorney's hand, with limiting liability in mind. And I'll reread it. Vessels to be used for liveaboard purposes must be in good material condition, not likely to sink. Doesn't say unsinkable. Or become a menace to navigation, and to be of a design suitable for operation on the waters of the Pacific Ocean. All vessels must be currently registered or documented. So I'll reread the Pacific Ocean thing. Be of a design suitable for operation on the waters of the Pacific Ocean. But,
Does it say it has to?
no, a design suitable. So I don't see that as I don't see that ordinance as co-signing onto the seaworthiness of a vessel. I can tell that it was written actually with that concern of liability in mind, and I don't see any other regulations that go to the extent, frankly, that am I missing something? Ron, I'd like to get your input on that.
I think if the ordinance was changed to modify the on Pacific Ocean to something different, which I'm not prepared to talk about right now, but it seems to me that the issue here is Morro Bay. It's a pretty big piece of water, really. I think that's the only problem that I see with that particular provision.
And what's the problem with it?
The problem with it is that there are, in fact, vessels that the city may decide. If you go with that ordinance, if you go with that provision of the ordinance, I would argue that there are vessels that are permitted, liveaboards, that were not designed and were not built and are not suitable to operate on the Pacific Ocean. But by definition, Pacific Ocean is unprotected waters.
Okay, thank you. But I'm responding to some of the public comments, and I've been listening very closely to them throughout the evening. And a lot of talk was offered about the extent of surveying. And I don't see that we're asking, I don't see in the ordinance here that we're asking the Harbor Department for the purpose of liveaboards to do extensive surveying. I don't see it. So I think in that regard, we might be trying to fix something that ain't broke again as well. All right, so with regard, let's back up just a step here. With regard to qualified marine surveyor acceptable to the city, have we decided that we want to leave that? Don't you love government? It's taken us an hour and 15 minutes to decide we don't want to do anything. Do we want to leave that as is without making any recommendations for change?
I'd like to recommend to make no changes to the liveaboard at this time. Besides, maybe, as Ron said, a couple wordings that maybe we can direct toward Eric to look at.
Well, when you say recommending no change, are you...
On the survey.
Okay, yeah, good.
Let's do that.
Yeah. What does the rest of the board feel with regard to that?
I agree with that, but I think part of the problem arises because we continue to use the word survey. We're not doing a survey. They're doing an inspection. And it happens that besides the Harbor Patrol officers who are qualified to do that inspection, there has to be some kind of criteria if you're going to have somebody else do it. And the only other criteria that we could give would be somebody who calls themselves a marine surveyor, someone who looks closely at boats. So I think if we, number one, stop saying the word survey in relation to the liveaboard inspection, recognize that it's an inspection, and also recognize if you're going to have people other than the Harbor Patrol, the city-appointed people who work on our waterfront and who work on boats, then you have to call them something, and you are implicitly giving a bit of criteria, a bit of objectivity to those who would be allowed to do it by saying a qualified marine surveyor. So it was a linguistic problem. What else could you call somebody other than a surveyor, or who else could do an inspection? And how else could the Harbor Department decide if they were capable of doing that inspection except by calling them or having a surveyor do it?
Thank you, Lynn. Excellent points. And I would, in response to that, I would add that nowhere on the application for the liveaboard permit is the word survey. No. Further, on the permit itself, it states that the inspector does not certify that the vessel is safe or seaworthy, and further goes on that the applicant agrees to indemnify and hold the city harmless. So on the form itself, the inspector is signing here that they are not certifying that the vessel is safe or seaworthy, and it is simply an inspection. It's a checklist inspection of the sanitation device And let me even check myself on that. It's just, it's a checkoff that no discharge or sewage or wastewater is allowed. So thank you for pointing that out. Dana, did you have further comment? Why don't you use another one there?
Well, I would agree that according to the way this is all written up, I think we don't really need to change anything. The issue with it being a survey, whether or not, it's just an inspection. That's what it says. And I'm not sure what you guys want as far as the liverboards that are here tonight, if you want more of a survey or less of a survey. It's going back and forth. When you talk about the rest of the boats in the bay, I think, well, this is an area that is most concerned. These are people that are getting a permit to stay on their boat to live on the bay. So they would be possibly the greatest impact of a boat owner that the city can regulate.
No.
Anyways, if it were to go beyond that, I think then that's up to the State Park Marina to deal with, and if the city has to be involved, whatever. As far as changing this, I think the only thing that I can see that you might want to change is in this Article 1 here, vessels to be used, liveable purposes, must be in good material condition, not likely to sink or become a menace to navigation, and to be a design suitable for operation on the waters of Morro Bay Harbor instead of the Pacific Ocean. I mean, if you just change that, that seems like it would solve a lot of problems. Other than that, I don't really see any changes.
All right, so I'm going to...
I concur on that, and I think that if we did those two changes, one, no changes for the surveyors, change it so that it's navigable in the harbors of Morro Bay, which actually maybe helps some liability issues, and I don't think there's really a big problem with the liveaboards, to be honest with you.
Okay, so to make sure that we've got the qualified marine surveyor acceptable to the city wrapped up, my understanding from the board is that no, we aren't recommending a change. Is there anyone, and we don't need a motion for that, so I just, to make sure, black and white here, is there anyone that would like to offer a motion for that issue? All right, seeing none, we have no recommendation for that. We'll leave that as stands. Now, what I'd like us to do is come up specifically with the recommendations. We've heard two so far. One is to change the words, and this is in section let me make sure I'm in the right place here. Page 29, page 30, let me find my page 28. There we go. This is in section 15.40.03, no, 15.40.040, permit issuance. Item number A1, vessels to be used for liveaboard purposes, simply changing the words Pacific Ocean to Morro Bay. So we'd like to throw that out to the department for consideration, Eric. We're not making a recommendation right now that it is changed to that, but we're giving you that as an area to look at, and you can come back and let us know what you think about it or not.
And perhaps a way to move forward on this, and I agree with Drew to a degree on the liability issue. I mean, but I don't think that because we do a liveaboard inspection, we've suddenly underwritten the entire operation and condition of that vessel. We do have that liability waiver that you read out in the inspection form. Everything we do on the water, if I stop and check a boat for anything and it goes on because of some other condition that somebody can make the case that I should have been aware of, it's a liability. We've got liabilities left and right. Obviously, the aim is to minimize those liabilities. I would suggest a way to move forward on this is bring this to the attention of our city attorney and their firm, which they have many in there, and let them look at that. The Pacific Ocean thing, I mean, Ron makes a point. If you define the Pacific Ocean, well, what is that? Today, before the wind came up, it was pretty beautiful. In the middle of winter, you know, under what conditions on the Pacific Ocean? The Pacific Ocean pretty much has every condition under the sun that any ocean can have, and there's no one vessel in the world that can cope with every single one of those conditions. So where does it end? Waters of Morro Bay? You know, I think the intent, again, is to ensure that a liveaboard vessel has the basic equipment to contain its sewage, to communicate, to be able to make a call if something's wrong. Remember, we're safety and security forces on the bay. You know, you're living on public property. You're subject to a permit process to allow that. And some rudimentary ability to safely operate and get underway under a myriad of conditions. To get underway to go get water, to go empty your holding tank. Your pennant line's breaking, you're on a mooring, and it's blowing 25, 30 knots in the springtime. You've got to be able to get underway, and your boat's got to be able to safely maneuver under relatively normal conditions. Yeah, on the Pacific Ocean, it's 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. No, there's not a lot of boats that are going to be able to do that. But the intent, I believe, is some rudimentary operability and condition of the vessel that precludes, you know, just complete houseboat type situations for a structure or a vessel that was never intended to physically move through the water and be able to be a part of the safety and security force, is instead become a liability. And I think that's what the liveaboard ordinance was trying to get at, and still tries to get at, and what we try to get at. We don't do a marine survey, and I don't think, like Drew says, I mean, there's through holes, there's engines, there's you know, chain plates, there's tons of things that we don't look at that will create unseaworthiness issues that we don't go after as part of the liveaboard inspection. It's just a basic, is the boat in relatively sound condition, and can it get us underway and get out of its own way and get under power? So perhaps, and I rambled a bit there, but taking this to the city attorney and having them look at the liability issues, the language that's in there in terms of that one section that, and maybe changing from Pacific Ocean to Morro Bay, and like you said, I mean, yes, I have to assume that when this was written, it had a pretty good city attorney review of it, and things that were flags that were raised then were raised, and what we have took that into consideration. But like everything, laws change, city attorneys change. It's not a bad thing to have these sorts of things reviewed once in a while, and even the inspection form itself, and getting some indemnification type language in there, making sure that we're solid with our language on there. Wouldn't necessarily change the liveaboard ordinance itself, with the exception of maybe that wording, Pacific Ocean to Morro Bay, but redoing the forms to make sure that the liability issues aren't there.
All right.
Or at least minimized.
So we've got those two issues. Thank you, Eric. We've got those two issues as suggestions for you. The other issue that was brought up by Ron earlier was in section 15.40.050, termination or revocation of permit. And the first item there is discharge of sewage. So that issue was brought up because under one of the approved MSDs, type 1, 2, or 3, it is legal to dump treated sewage, is my understanding. But that needs to be taken, have a look taken at from a standpoint of ordinances. So that would be one of our suggestions. The other that I have from reading through this, Eric, and I'd like to get your take on this as soon as I find it. There it is. At the end of that clause, 15.40.050, termination or revocation of permit. At the bottom there, it talks about item B1, an appeal process. So that if a liveaboard permit was actually revoked, that the individual that holds the permit has the opportunity to appeal that decision. And when I read through this, it didn't make too much sense to me, and I'll explain to you why. So I've got to read it for you first. appeal. A decision by the harbor director to terminate or revoke a liveaboard permit pursuant to this section shall be appealable to the Harbor Advisory Board. Any such appeal must be filed in writing with the harbor director within 10 days of the date of notice of revocation. The revocation shall be stayed while the appeal is pending unless it is determined by the harbor director that immediate cessation of overnight occupancy of the vessel is necessary for the preservation of the public peace, health, or safety. The appeal shall be filed in writing and shall specify all of the grounds for the appeal. The Harbor Advisory Board shall provide the permit holder an opportunity to present evidence on his behalf and to challenge the determination of the harbor director. Formal rules of evidence or procedure need not be followed. If the Harbor Advisory Board is unable to approve any formal motion regarding the appeal after 2 publicly held hearings on the appeal, then the revocation shall become effective 3 days following the second public meeting. If the appeal is denied revocation, and it looks to me to be a typo here, if the appeal is denied revocation, shall become effective 3 days following the Harbor Advisory Board's decision. So here's what surprises me about that. We're an advisory body without rulemaking or authoritative power. We're here to serve at the pleasure of the council and make recommendations to the council and to the department for that matter. And you guys listen to our input and take it under consideration. It seems to me that that there's an implied course of action here, and it doesn't really spell it out. It spells it out on one side, but the implied side is that, if I'm reading this correctly, we've got the ability to appeal your decision, the city's decision. Say again? To countermand it. Which doesn't, which I'd like you to have the attorney look at that, because that to me seems inconsistent with everything else that I know about this board and the way the advisory boards work.
Well, I mean, any decision by any department, be it planning, police, public services, any sort of a ruling that they make is appealable. Typically, it goes to their governing body, which ultimately is the city council, but if there's a Public Works Advisory Board or Recreation and Parks Commission in between, I think in most cases the city council and the city's direction in the past has been to route it through that applicable body. Yeah, it looks like it gave you some overruling or binding power to, if I make a decision. And I would purport that, it says for termination or revocation, it would be my thought that that section would apply to if someone's applied for a permit, has never gotten one, or theirs expired and they're renewing it. This really just says termination or revocation. If somebody's permit is expired and they're wishing to renew it, and I decide not to renew it, I would assume that that would be appealable under the same section, even though this just says it's appealable under termination and revocation, which means you have a permit, you've done something I think is bad or wrong, and I'm taking it away. I would think that that would apply, although it doesn't say that exactly. I would think that would apply to an application as well.
Yeah.
But I'm happy to take that part to the city attorney as well.
Well, what I'm thinking about is, we have the opportunity to listen to an appeal from fishermen for purposes of qualifying for a slip. And actually, if you read through that, even that appeal process results in a recommendation to the director. Because with the qualifying for a commercial slip, it doesn't give us the authority to actually countermand. And even so, it would seem to me if that was the intent, then that would still obviously have to go to the council. So that would be one of the suggestions for me to the department, for you to look at or have the attorney look at, but that definitely, to me, that looks like it needs to be cleaned up.
So I guess the question is that, should it get appealed to the Harbor Advisory Board, is that appeal advisory to council, or is that appeal final?
Well, it can't be final. The way the rest of the city code works. I think a template might be looking at how the slip qualifying appeal process works. Because again, I think my memory serves me pretty correctly in this instance, even that appeal process, it is a recommendation to you.
Yeah, Eric, I agree with Jeff. I think that there is a inappropriate implication possible in the existing language.
Because the way this reads right now, it would get sticky pretty quickly, I think, if a liveaboard actually did have to come before us with an appeal. I've only been on the board for 4 years. That hasn't come up. Has it come up? Yeah. Gene's not, our old timer, Gene's not here. So that's another area.
Insofar as the internal review, the city's review, if you will, of 15.40.040A1, I would suggest that the city consider including two other provisions, simple provisions in A1. Number one being that the vessel comply with all applicable federal and state regulations, because that directly addresses a multiplicity of the safety issues. Number two, that it be able to communicate via Marine VHF, because it's something you folks talk about all the time, but it isn't required by ordinance anywhere.
No, if you go back, you're looking at, that section 1540.050, the conditions under which we can terminate or revoke a permit. If you go back to the previous page, 1540.040, permit issuance, A1 is that paragraph we went over and over, liveaboard purposes must be in good material condition, blah, blah, blah. 2, liveaboard vessels required to have adequate vessel sanitation facilities.
Eric, I'm referring to 15.40.40 or .040. That's what I'm referring to. If I said 50, I misspoke. 15.40.040, the same thing you're now talking about.
Okay.
Item A1.
Ron, didn't you just mention radio and phone? Because
Yeah,
that is right there. Item number 4.
It's number 4.
Thanks.
I think that's why I was getting confused.
Oh, thank you.
I thought you were talking about the sewage discharge part on
I
revocation.
appreciate that. So the only, other than the Waters of Morro Bay thing, which has already been talked about for a long time, comply with applicable federal and state regulations. Because that takes care of at least 8 of the items on your safety list, by definition.
Doesn't that start walking us back down the surveyor path versus just the inspection of those limited items?
I think it's good to spell it out.
Maybe, maybe not. You don't have to, and there's all sorts of stuff in ordinances that are required that no one is mandated to follow up on, and I'm not talking about the harbor stuff necessarily. There's all kinds of stuff. I mean, if you look at the ordinances for real property in Morro Bay, for instance, that I have some experience with, there's all sorts of requirements that there's no enforcement on. So it's just a suggestion. I mean, do whatever. I think it addresses part of the liability issue.
All right, well, you could throw that into the hopper. All right. So we've offered a laundry list so far. I think we've got 4 items, if I'm counting correctly. We're doing better. We got the 4 items done in about 20 minutes. It took us over an hour to do the nothing item. What other items do we want to point out that might be gray areas or need a further looking at by us in the department or perhaps the attorney? No?
Well,
So Go ahead, sorry.
Eric has already mentioned it. He mentioned it 2 or 3 months ago, and he mentioned it again tonight. And I think, as I understand it, the Harbor Department is undertaking an internal review of the inspection form as well. And that was 3 months ago or whatever it was. That was in response. He responded to the point of potential liability for the city. And he's been thinking about it, and he has some data from other places to refer to, so, if he decides to do that.
Okay. And going back, thank you, Ron, and going back to our staff report, looking at the two things that we were looking at accomplishing, we certainly got the first, which was the ordinances as it pertains to marine surveyors, so we suggested that nothing be changed there. And then the inspections themselves. So we hit on those 4 items, and I suppose a fifth then, and I think you were already doing, as Ron just alluded to, a fifth then would be modification or review and potential modification of the inspection form itself. Anything else? And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how you make sausage. Okay, just for kicks, before I close this item, one last opportunity for public comment. I am going to limit it to 2 minutes, though, because it's starting to get a little late.
I promise not to take 2 minutes. Dwayne Jacobson again. The only thing thank you very much for plodding through this. I understand where you're coming from. It's unfortunate that this was brought up in the first place. It's kind of nonsense. I am very serious, though, about checking all vessels on this bay. I am very serious about that. I will harp on this, and I will stay on this, and I will write letters to people beginning now. Up until this point, I've been keeping it to myself. I've been quiet about it. I've been threatened by the city about this, but no longer. There is an issue on this bay. If you have a child and you let that child on the bay, you're taking a risk right now. There's 100 boats on this bay that are discharging. They're out there. And the city, the Harbor Department, refuses to take any action on it. I will have to harp on this for a long time. Thank you for your time. Thank you tonight.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Yes.
I take great issue with...
I'm sorry, hang on.
It's my turn.
I'm sorry, I didn't realize you were coming up.
I was going to plead for you to please take this up because Drew will harp to me until you do. You have just spent, 3.5 hours, 2.5 hours talking about 20 people on the bay. Can we please move it on to the 470 people that are on the bay with boats? Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, public comment is now closed. Eric?
Yeah, I can't let those comments go unstraightened out. Mr. Jacobson pointed out a section of the Harbors and Nav Code, Section 775, where we cannot regulate the type of MSD installed on a vessel. Question of whether that implies that we cannot require that a MSD be installed on the vessel would be a question of law that I don't know the answer to. It says I can't tell you what type. I can't tell you whether you can put type 1, type 2, or type 3 on. If it's required, if certain vessels of a certain size and then certain commercial passenger vessels require that MSDs be on board, and if they're required under federal or state law to be on board, yes, I can enforce that. I can't tell you which type of MSD to put on your vessel. Can I tell you that you have to have a MSD on your vessel? Perhaps. Under the law, I don't know. That would be a question for the city attorney. Pretend we can. Pretend I can say, all you guys are vessel owners, and the city of Morro Bay has promulgated a regulation that says you must have an MSD on your vessel. Without probable cause, I have no way of determining whether you've got one on and whether it's operable and in good condition. It just says you have to have one. I don't see that having such a regulation on the books is going to ensure that all those vessels are not going to discharge just because they are required to have something on their vessel. As Drew pointed out, he's inspected vessels and he's found things amiss. I can't just go on under my authority given to me under the law, inspect your vessel to make sure that something isn't amiss without probable cause. And that is a threshold of the law that doesn't give me the authority to just go in and check any old vessel any old time. Under the liveaboard process, it's an inspection to get a permit. I cannot, if Drew and Denise have a valid liveaboard permit, under the law, unless I have probable cause, I can't just go in next week and make sure that your thing's working as it should be. I can't, with anybody's boat.
It's a permit process, I agree with you.
It becomes a pretty big can of worms to try and institute some sort of a global requirement. And again, I don't know, and it would be an attorney to answer this, and maybe Department of Boating and Waterways, and they can get their state attorneys, and I'll ask. I'm happy to go ask. If that section that says that I cannot dictate what type of MSD to put on, am I able to dictate that an MSD be on? That is the question I don't know, and I'm happy to ask that. But then it begs the next question, okay, if I am, and we go there, is that going to do any good?
All right. So we're not going to get into an extensive discussion on that topic because it's not on the agenda tonight. As a matter of fact, this may come up during future agenda items tonight. So thank you, everyone, for your patience through that item C1. And unless there are any other comments by board members with regard to item C1? No, then that can... Oh, yes, Lynn.
Partially in response to Mr. Jacobson's statement that we need an MSD on all boats, we have a federal law that says you must not discharge. If he knows of somebody who is discharging, does he not have something of an obligation if this is something that bothers him so much? He would have an obligation to report it and to perhaps go further with it and try to correct the situation directly with the individual involved.
Thank you, Lynn. And that concludes item C1, the review of liveaboard ordinance regarding liveaboard permit inspections and marine surveyor requirements. And again, thank you everyone for your perseverance and patience with that process. But we got there. Item C2, update from the Marine Services Facility Boatyard Ad Hoc Committee on the committee's recent activities, if there are any. Ron?
The committee has received, since the prior Harbor Advisory Board meeting in September, has received no new information from the consultant or from the city or from the Morro Bay Commercial Fishermen's Organization. So I would turn to the harbor director, who is the city liaison, for that portion of the contract and to give us a brief update if there's something new happening.
Sure. So as Dana, as you brought up earlier, the survey's out. That did circulate through the ad hoc committee, through the Fishermen's Organization, had some revisions to it. It went out. It's out soaking. We're advertising it, trying to get input. The case studies task or document is in draft form. It's Lisa Wise Consulting has sent that to us and to the Commercial Fishermen's Organization a week or two ago. I have not had a chance to pull that out, open it up, and send it out back out to you guys. I will do that hopefully this week, but maybe since tomorrow's Friday, early next week, and we'll get that draft document out. It's their final, not their final draft, but it's they've collected the data they're going to collect and done the interviews they're going to do and done their case studies. They're ready to have it looked at, so I will get that back to you guys as soon as I can, so you can have your way with it and get your comments back, and the commercial fishermen will do the same, and hopefully put that little chapter back together, and then we'll be looking hopefully at the intent on the survey is to soak it about a month, 30 days, and see what kind of input we get. We already got quite a bit from the Fishermen's Organization, as we heard earlier, when they looked at a draft for comments on the questions. They just went straight out and filled it out, so hopefully we're getting some good data back on that. Coast Guard filled theirs out. I sent one over next door, and they filled it out and sent it in, so hopefully we're getting some good information back. So that's you got any questions, that's about all the updates I've got on that.
Anything else, Ron? Any questions or comments from board members with regard to that report? None? Great. That concludes that item. Thank you, Ron. Appreciate it. Item C3 is an update from the Capital Improvement Planning, or CIP, Ad Hoc Committee on the committee's recent activities, if any. The committee didn't meet over the last month, so there's nothing to report there. That concludes well, I should say, any questions, comments from board members? Yes, Eric.
I'm assuming we still want these to be just standing reports, blank, unless, I mean, if I've got something, like and maybe next time around we'll have a little bit to report on here, but I'm assuming we just want to keep these on as placeholders every time in case new information comes up.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Eric. That concludes item C3. Moving on to item D, new business. Item D1, selection of 2 Harbor Advisory Board members to sit on the selection panel to review the request for proposals received for the redevelopment of lease site. I'll just call it the Morro Bay Aquarium lease site. Eric, would you please introduce this subject to us?
Yeah, hopefully it's not a subject that's foreign. As you know, through quite a bit of a process, starting, I guess back in 2013, maybe in 2012, the Morro Bay Aquarium was coming up for expiration on that lease in 2018. And the question became, do we negotiate with the existing leaseholders or put it out for public RFP? We went through the Harbor Advisory Board, I think once, maybe twice. Eventually ended up, City Council direction was to put it out for request for proposals, to put it out to the public to see if we can get any proposals on that lease site. We did put out the RFP in June, or the council approved it in June 2013, the issuance of the RFP. We had taken previous RFPs from a couple of lease sites and Lori and I looked at some from some other cities, put together an RFP. Council left it largely intact. They did direct some changes into the review panel process, one of which was assigning, I think, 2 seats to City Council, 2 to Harbor Advisory Board members, a few from the public, and a couple from staff. So they did want a fairly specific panel. That RFP was due April 15th. One entity that we know, the Central Coast Aquarium, that we believe is, and I still think they are, it appears that they're going to submit a proposal. They requested a deadline extension. We gave them 6 months, which is August 15th, coming right up, to allow them more time. And that time's coming up, so we're just kind of starting to get things in place and looking at panel members, potential panel members.
You said August 15th.
What'd I say?
You said August 15th?
Oh, sorry.
I think you meant October.
October 15th, it's due. So we're just getting ahead of the game, or at least keeping up with the game, and coming to the advisory board now since we meet monthly. We'd like to have 2 possible members, if you can select among yourselves, 2 that would like to serve on that RFP review process. We put the RFP into the staff report just so you can have a look at it and see what the criteria and parameters are, and hopefully we can select 2 folks, and then assuming we get a proposal, we'll bring it back to council for their folks that they want to assign and continue on with the review process.
Thank you, Eric. So what I'll do first off is ask for volunteers for this. I know that Gene expressed an interest to me before he left that he would like to sit on that selection panel. I would be interested in sitting on that selection panel. But before I even move on, here's how I'd like to work it. There's 2 people that have expressed interest. I'll ask if there's anyone else that has an interest in it, and if there is anyone else, then we can talk about it a little bit and take a vote, because I'd like it to be the board's will on that. So is there anyone else that would like to sit on that selection committee?
I'm good.
I like the selection.
Okay.
I do too.
It's kind of like the thing where everybody else steps back and leaves the 2 people up front. Well, that was easy then. So by default. Yeah. Well, and let me throw out the reasoning too. Gene has a lot of practical experience and a lot of design experience. I have a financial background and some contract and lease negotiation experience as well. So I think the 2 of us bring valuable information coming from two different directions to this selection committee. So good. So everybody's okay then with those two? Why don't we, actually, we should do a vote for those two. So
I nominate Jean and Jeff to serve on the committee for evaluation of lease sites for the Morro Bay Aquarium.
All right.
69 and 70.
So it's been moved by Lynn. Is there a second? Seconded by Ron. So it's been moved to nominate Jeff and Jean for the selection committee for the aquarium lease site review. Any discussion? No. Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? It's unanimous. All right. Thank you for that. We appreciate it. That concludes item D1, new business. We'll move on to declaration of future agenda items, but I just wanted to mention once again, I did briefly earlier, I wanted to thank Board Member Reisner for the research that he did for that earlier unfinished business item, the liveaboard ordinance, and forwarding that data and information to the harbor director to be included in our report. I know that some of that stuff is the stuff I'd like to do, but just simply don't have the time and sometimes the expertise to do, so I appreciate you doing that. We all do. Item E, declaration of future agenda items. I've got one item. And I think this is something else that may not go anywhere, but I feel it incumbent upon myself as a board member representing the public to our council. This is an important issue to apparently a number of folks out there in the harbor. So I would like to bring up as a future agenda item the issue of MSDs and sewage dumping into the harbor by non-liveaboard vessels, non-permitted liveaboard vessels. Is there anyone else? We need three people to. Okay, so we've got three folks on that one. So we can put that on the future agenda item list. And Eric had mentioned earlier that he might want to even look at some things on that on his own. So I don't know how we want to time that moving forward. Your input on that, Eric?
So that's non-liveaboard vessels?
Correct.
Okay, you kind of.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's
It's
sort of a
getting late.
double
I'm starting to
negative
slur a little.
thing
Yeah, I slowed down because I wanted to make sure I got it. Non-permitted liveaboard vessels.
Non-permitted, there aren't any non-permitted liveaboard vessels.
Well,
There will not be any non-permitted liveaboard.
So all not, well,
No, all vessels. Yeah.
everything other than liveaboard. We do have some vessels that are, and they are current ongoing enforcement challenges. We do have a small list of vessels that are being used as liveaboards. They are, by definition, non-permitted vessels, but I don't think that's what you're getting at. You're getting at Drew's other 470 boats.
Right.
Okay. I'm just going to say non-liveaboard. I mean, assuming perfect compliance and we had 100% compliance, we would have all permitted liveaboards. There's going to be some non-permitted always, but it's everybody else you're talking about.
right.
And the issue really, I think, it starts fundamentally with sewage discharge from vessels into Morro Bay, period.
Correct.
Irrespective of the type or nature or whatever the vessel is.
Okay.
Because there seems to be some ambiguity in the city's own ordinances as to whether their discharge is okay or not okay. And then you've got water quality regs and state regs and you got federal regs, so.
Okay, so I'll.
No, I like your item.
Yeah, no,
No,
but I'll back up a little and all vessels is what we're looking at. And that may just be, Eric, that for the permitted vessels, we feel that there's sufficient oversight or enforcement already. It could be addressed that easily, but yeah, I agree. Let's start with the big tent and work our way down. Is that good with you too? Okay.
Eric?
An item that is coming back around, State Park Marinas, we've heard that a few times in the operating agreement. We did meet with State Parks, the city attorney and I, a few weeks ago, and they have a study, and they're ready to, their desire is to do a public review of that document and their possible 3 directions that they think they may want to go in order to continue on with the State Park Marina dredging and repair and maintenance and all that. And they'd like to do that publicly, and they'd like to do that. And we all concluded that the Harbor Advisory Board would probably be a good venue for that as a first blush public process to look at that and see where we want to go. And then council, I think, wants it by the end of the year. But if we've got this tag going to the Harbor Advisory Board, that may push it back a little bit. Parks and Druthers are to get something, first public meeting prior to mid to end of February. Understanding that we meet once a month and don't meet in January. Could potentially do a call for a special meeting in January if we thought we had to go there. I guess we can look at that towards later in December, but I'd be looking to put that on, I don't know if it'll be ready enough by November, but maybe December. So we'll hear that one, which is a future agenda now, so I just want to throw that out there. That's going to be a pretty meaty item, I would imagine.
Yeah, good.
I think we got a lot on our agenda,
Yeah, we do.
so I don't think we need to add anything else.
Well, thank you for that, Bill.
No more problem.
Returning to democracy, is there anyone else that has a suggestion?
I've been stunned into silence.
It's getting late. Okay, I don't see any other declaration of future agenda items. Anything else from Eric or Polly with regard to the ordering of the future agenda items? Anything else with regard to that? We're looking okay. And Gene's not here for me to move to adjourn. Oh,
Mr. Harbor Director, do you have any sense, and no is fine, as to when the next piece of the rules, harbor rules and regulations review process might come forward?
Notwithstanding the State Park Marina item, I'd like to get the next chunk 2 or B or however we numbered them before the end of the year. I think I see the process as if we can come to a conclusion on these pieces and then bring that all to council in one big package, because it's going to be changes to our rules and regulations. It may be municipal code changes. It's going to be a pretty big package.
all right. So Gene's not here to move to adjourn, but in honor of Gene, Dana moves to adjourn. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
All right, all in favor? All right, this meeting is hereby adjourned. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.